Hey gang, Gene Lyons here. This episode of Shat The Movies is about a personally precious film and was generously commissioned just for me. I am deeply grateful and humbled by the gesture and the quality time it created for me and Big D. If it's not too much to ask, I've got one more favorite request. In November, Sarah and I will be walking in the Arizona Animal Welfare League Walk to Save Animals. I have set the lofty goal of raising $500 for Arizona's oldest no-kill family shelter, and I need your help. Please visit www.aawl.org/Gene Lyons, all one word, that's GeneLyons, to contribute. You can leave a little message with your contribution, and I will read it on the podcast. So think about dedicating your contribution to your pet or in memory of a pet that you've lost. I volunteer at AAWL, and I promise you all the money goes to veterinary care, adoption services, and transportation for animals in need, both dogs and cats, and a few exotics now that I think about it. Thank you so much for all your support, and enjoy the pod.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with a number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, and our YouTube channel where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
So, Gene, before we get into tonight's episode, I just wanted to discuss something with you, with the audience. So recently I've been going in doing some maintenance on the feeds of the website and finally organized all of our podcasts on Apple Podcasts into a channel. So now you can go to our channel. If you go to one of the podcasts, whether it's, say, Shat The Movies, you'll see under there, it says Shat Pod. You can go in there and you can see all of the podcasts from our history in Shat The Movies, Shat on TV. And while I was doing this, I was going through some of the analytics. It is amazing how the popularity of the film, obviously, is tied to our numbers. It's normally great because we've had a string of some good movies. I'm a little worried, though, Gene, about last week's film and tonight's film. I'm sensing we might be down a bit because these films aren't the normal blockbusters that we traditionally cover, but they are a need for the Pantheon of Shat. And it's last 2 weeks have been films that I'm really glad that I watched. And tonight's is a very personal experience for you. You've been raving about this for years. And this was a specific commission for you from one of our great listeners, Mike T., who wrote in and said, please review the 1987 British black comedy and Gene Lyons' beloved classic, Withnail and I.
It's not often that I indulge myself with a request of a movie, and it's not often that the listeners say this one's for Gene, and I accept that. I'm not the most popular person on the podcast. So, Mike, this has special meaning for me, and it really hit at a great time. I've been training for an upcoming jiu-jitsu tournament. I've been working really, really hard, long hours, keeping up with the pod. We've been doing multiple recordings a day just to keep our schedule straight and keep these releases coming on time. And I am exhausted. I didn't think that I could get another movie in this week. And Withnail and I was incredible. It gave me some quality time with Sarah to bond. Big D and I have been messaging each other back and forth about this movie. and it just put a smile on my face. It's really been carrying me through the week. So thank you so much for this commission.
Yeah, and this is one of those weeks when the people write in and say, thank you very much for what you do. This is like 10 hours of movie watching in a week without the recording, without all of it. But this was a very personal. I felt like Gene was there on the couch with me. It was an intimate moment. I got insight into your soul, Gene, and I will get into this. I see this as the formative turning point in your life. I can see the young Gene Lyons trying to find his way through the world, like these two characters we're going to cover tonight, and how this was a guiding hand, a firm hand on your back, leading you down the path that led you to the man you are today.
It definitely played a huge role. And our commissioner was kind enough to write in and say, hey there, Shat Crew. I just listened to your King Solomon's Mines pod and panicked when I heard you say you do Withnail and I without a commission. I really hope I can impress upon you how much it would mean to me to commission that movie for Gene and also for my 50th birthday in December 2024. Or close to that anyway. I want to be responsible for this movie as it is a personal favorite introduced to me by my Irish first wife while I was living in London at the height of Britpop in 1997, 1999. I worked in Camden Town right near the locks. So many great lines and performances from this 1987 gem. Uncle Monty, the poacher, Danny the headhunter, presuming Ed. I hope Big D enjoys it for the time capsule it is. Ralph Brown was cast in Wayne's World 2 as the world's greatest roadie because of this film. Stop saying that, Withnail. Of course he's the fucking farmer. Get back in the van! I demand to have booze. Fucking hell, it's a bloody classic. And that comes from Mike.
And Gene, we have to make an effort. We can't be the podcast that does a comedy and we're like, hey, do you remember that funny line they said? It's going to be a challenge because all of these lines on their own, we've watched the film, are funny, we will laugh, but let's not be that podcast.
Withnail and I is a 1987 British black comedy written and directed by Bruce Robinson, loosely based on Robinson's life in London in the late 60s. The plot follows two unemployed actors, Withnail and I, portrayed by Richard E. Grant and Paul McGann, respectively, who share a flat in Camden Town in 1969. Needing a holiday, they obtain the key to a country cottage in the Lake District belonging to Withnail's eccentric Uncle Monty and drive there. The weekend holiday proves less recuperative than they expected. Withnail and I was Grant's first film and established his profile. It featured performances by Richard Griffiths as Withnail's Uncle Monty and Ralph Brown as Danny the drug dealer. The film has tragic and comic elements and is notable for its period music and many quotable lines. It has been described as one of Britain's biggest cult films. The character I is named Marwood in the published screenplay, but he goes unnamed in the film credits. So, Big D, as you mentioned, this movie played a huge role in my life, but it came a little bit later. I didn't see it as a teenager. I didn't see it as a kid. I first saw Withnail and I as a 20-something living in Ohio during what likely was the peak of my Anglophilia. My home at the time, if you looked around that living room, that kitchen, English tea service, Shakespeare, books on the Royals just stacked on the coffee tables, pulp posters on the wall. We had all the Bronte sisters represented in the bookshelves, countless Britpop CDs, and British films on DVD. We hadn't really gone to streaming services quite yet, so there was a lot of physical media representing the great nation known as England. And none of it prepared me for when I pressed play on this movie and saw the most English thing I had ever seen in my life, which was Withnail and I. Immediately, I think during the first watch, I was already quoting it. And if you haven't seen this movie before, I challenge you not to. I'm sure that annoys everyone around me as I still do it to this day. And it got me hooked on Richard E. Grant. I said, God, this guy is amazing. He's so funny. I got to see everything he's ever done. So I started watching all of his other movies. And the first one I went to, which was kind of similar to this sort of indie, smaller movie, was How to Get Ahead in Advertising. Not quite as good as Withnail and I. And none of the movies that he's done really since, I think, have had the same magic. He's had small roles in movies that we've done here on the podcast, like LA Story and Dracula. But again, it wasn't Withnail and I. And it makes me believe that there is magic in this movie. This is really a once-in-a-lifetime lightning strike of talent and cinematography and a script that just blows the doors off anything I've ever seen. It's amazing.
Yeah, Grant. I only know the older Grant. I didn't, like, when he came on, even I didn't put two and two together because he's so young. It's his first film, and he is compelling. He reminded me of a Tim Curry, who can deliver that serious comedy. He's great, and I've become a fan of him from this movie. But Gene, as I said in the intro, when the podcast started, you were brought in as our local vampire expert. That was one of the skills and one of your life's loves that brought you here as the expert. And we recorded that episode. I went back to look, The Lost Boys, in the end of September in 2016. And for those who haven't been with us since the beginning, I met you through Roger. So we had never met. We recorded, I think, for almost 3 years without actually being in the same physical place. But since then, we've spent thousands of hours on the podcast, on the phone, texting. You've become one of my best friends. That's like roughly 2,900 days ago. That was the first time that we've recorded. And today, I think, Gene, it's the first time that I see you. In this review, I see you. I can see you've come out. See me. Everything. You've raved about this movie. You've talked about it. And I was nervous because at one point you said something to the effect of, if someone didn't think this movie was funny, I don't think I could like them. So I felt a little peer pressure. I was like, what if I don't like it? Luckily, spoiler alert, I did like it. We'll see how much, but I was a little worried because what if I didn't like it? This might be the end of Shat The Movies. This might be the end of the podcast, everything. Because you would look at me and be like, I can't do this anymore with him. How did he not find this funny? So let's cross our fingers and hope our friendship can survive this. But it was great. I saw you. Your hair had to be inspired with this movie. Your dress, your witty torts. It has to be because of this movie.
I'm not sure exactly what I said, but I want to be clear that what I meant to say was that if a person didn't understand this movie, they really wouldn't understand me, as far as just my sense of humor, my worldview, and all that stuff. And that comes from a very earnest place, because we should prepare viewers. If you're going to watch this with somebody and you've never seen it before, you get worried right off the bat that they're not going to get this movie. I encourage you to do it anyway, because surprisingly, everyone I've watched this with gets it. It doesn't feel like they should, but they do. And with that, let's hit the underwhelming trailer.
To a delightful weekend in the country.
You are cordially invited to spend a carefree weekend in the English countryside. Bask in the warm sunshine.
We've gone on holiday by mistake.
Enjoy the rustic pleasure of country living.
It's gonna be so cold in here. Like Greenland in here.
Wants to get down there and have sex with those cows.
Partake of fine varietal wine.
You're drunk.
I assure you I'm not, officer. I've only had a few ales.
Take lunch at a charming pub.
We want the finest wines available to humanity. We want them here, and we want them now.
Fraternize with cheery locals.
I don't care where you come from.
Hans!
Experience culinary pleasure.
Fucking make it die.
There is, you will agree, certain je ne sais quoi about a firm young carrot.
Fish in the region's streams.
Don't threaten me with a dead fish.
Withnail and I, a trip worth taking.
What absolute twaddle.
In 1969, two unemployed young actors, Withnail and Marwood, live in a messy flat in Camden Town. Their only regular visitor is their drug dealer, Danny. One morning, the pair squabble about housekeeping and then leave to take a walk. Marwood proposes a trip to a rural cottage near Penwith, owned by Withnail's wealthy Uncle Monty. They visit Monty that evening at his luxurious Chelsea house. The three briefly drink together as Withnail casually lies to Monty about his acting career. He further deceives Monty by implying that Marwood attended Eton College. He persuades his uncle to lend them the cottage key, and they leave.
So I'd say in the probably 8 years that we've done the podcast, I think we're at 403 movies. We still haven't done the math on it because we've done some encore performances. I'd say probably 85, maybe 90% of the films we review, I've watched. So it's rare we get a film that I have no idea. And I like to, go into these reviews as blind as possible. I don't want to have any preconceived notions of the plot. I don't want to know what reviewers have said. I just want to, sometimes I'll get a general feel of the film from the little breakdown that we read the week before, but I don't want to know, what did popular culture think of this? What were the problems with the film? And in this film, it got me a little bit worried because I'm coming in blind. And like you said, giving people the warning, it immediately opens. There's maybe 3 seconds of the apartment and up comes the title card, Withnail and I. Immediately, like there's a problem with the editing. We see the apartment, we see their flat, and Marwood, who goes unnamed, he's sitting there, he's walking around, and it's giving me mixed signals. I'm starting to worry because I can't feel it out. Is he having a panic attack? Is he high? Is he drunk? I can't tell if this guy is sad, happy, suicidal, had just killed his roommate. I don't know if he lives alone. It is a complete blank slate. I don't know what type of film it's going to be. And for the first 10 minutes, Gene, I know you hate when this happens, the Westworld tinfoil came out. And I said, holy shit, Withnail is imaginary. This is in his head. Because we get a lot of Marwell's, his inner monologue are done in voiceovers. Then they go out to that bar and Withnail says to him, hey, give me a tenor and we will call. I was like, God, I got it, Gene. I already spotted it. It's one person. No, it's not one person, but still I felt a bit lost.
I mean, that's not that off base when you think about it, because he looks like hell. He's incredibly disheveled. He's doing things like drinking lighter fluid. It would make sense that this is like a drop dead Fred sort of a scenario. But, dear listeners, it is not. And I get nervous, as I mentioned, anytime a friend watches this movie, because they don't do that setup. They just go with it, right? It just starts. And it is easy to get lost. But I'm kind of glad they took this approach. And the reason why is a lot of time when we get these nostalgic films or retro films, right? Because this movie was made in the 80s, but it's set in 1969. They set it up, there's the doo-wop, there's, TV footage of Vietnam or something, right? There's everybody's wearing tie-dye or something like that. They don't do that here. And although a big part of this film's meaning is the end of the era, the end of the 60s, and we get to that kind of toward the end of the film still feels incredibly relevant because they didn't make it a retro movie. This isn't Austin Powers. This isn't Dazed and Confused. Withnail and Marwood really could be any two loser friends. They could be college students. They could be podcasters, right, who happen to live together. Just as long as they're losers and experiencing the world with very little money and very little direction, it works.
And again, I'm sorry. I didn't even know it was 1969. I thought this was just like Britain and it was kind of dirtier and grimier in the mid-'80s. They didn't have a TV. So I'm like, okay. The technology didn't jump out at me. I thought the cars were all beat to shit, old Jaguars and other cars. So I didn't even know it was 1969. Had no clue until I started reading it here. And I already talked about how quotable that this film is. And it's one of my complaints normally when we do movies that try to be smart. And it's something I always say about Clerks, that Clerks tried to be witty. They tried to be smart. And this movie succeeds where all of those fail. The characters here, they're going back and forth. They're usually arguing, they're debating, the mundane tasks. In Clerks, it was people coming in and out, renting videos. Here, it's everything from what's going on in the newspaper, what's going on in the pub, what's going on in the kitchen. Are there rats? It's all normal stuff. And normally when a movie has good writing and tries to be witty, it comes out 3 different ways. It's either unrealistic, people don't talk that way, unnatural and feeling forced, or even the worst, pretentious. The dialogue here is smart. It's very British, but it never seems stuck up. It never seems too pompous. The dialogue, it's fast, it's rapid fire, it's smart, it's witty. These guys are sarcastic. They're like good friends. They're busting each other's balls. It's dark, it's snarky, and it's that very British dry delivery. No one laughs at their own joke. No one laughs. It's all smart-ass comments. And as a result, you find yourself immediately liking these characters. I like Withnail. It's almost impossible not to start quoting these lines because I found myself, as I'm taking notes, trying to jot them down, one right after another. They are so good and so funny. And I mean, I could try to describe the one that hit me at first, Gene, where they go to visit the the eccentric rich uncle. Again, I don't know if this is the lap of luxury. I thought it was like an older apartment, and he was kind of a shut-in uncle who was a bit of a pack rat and a hoarder. But he is the educated uncle. He's wealthy, and they're in there and they're having this again conversation that nobody normally would, but it's very funny. And they start talking about like carrots. Oh, you like carrots? And the uncle says, "Oh, you little traitor! I think the carrot is indefinitely more fascinating than the geranium. The carrot has mystery. Flowers are essential tarts, prostitutes for the bees. There's a certain je ne sais quoi." Oh, a very special but firm young carrot. Excuse me. Normally, I would hate this shit, Gene. But delivered in these performances by Harry Potter's gay uncle, it is so funny. It's funnier than it deserves to be.
And it's hard to explain because they're whiny. They are eccentric.
Yes.
They are so over the top. These are like incredibly foppish Englishmen.
Yes.
But they're appealing, and it's got to be that the writing is just so good. Let's take Withnail, for example, okay? He's essentially a parasite. Right? This guy, he thinks he's going to be a star. He thinks he's entitled to all these things in the world. Nothing turns me off more than a person who isn't willing to do the work, who isn't willing to straighten themselves out, but thinks that they're the shit and that the world owes them something. He does nothing to help himself. Our first introduction to Withnail, he's stumbling around the apartment, which is a mess. He's done nothing to clean it. He's not sobering up. And what is his complaint? We've run out of wine. What are we going to do about it? Like it's Marwood's problem, right? No, it's your problem, dude. You ran out of wine. What are you going to do about it? He won't tolerate cold. He won't tolerate the rain. He won't drive a car. Anything that's a problem, sobriety, he's not doing any of that. But yet at the same time, you're like, I love this guy. And that is just pure charm.
You love him, and I can't tell if because he acts like a tough guy. A lot of times he is all talk. When Marwood like goes in the bathroom and somebody calls him like a ponce, he calls him a ponce, and he comes out and he's like, "Who would say that to you?" I'm like, "Oh shit, we're gonna get a fight. Maybe he's gonna hit him with the bottle and run out." No, he immediately comes out, and Withnail just cowers, and we see who he is, and they run away like children, like with their arms flapping out the door. And you start to see these guys are all talk. They're pathetic, but they're likably pathetic.
We've seen a lot of drunks in film, famously like Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow, I think is like or Arthur. I don't think anybody does a drunk the way Richard E. Grant does a drunk. And it's fascinating because in doing the research for this pod, I found out that he has an alcohol intolerance. Like if this guy drinks alcohol, he'll be sick for a whole day. He doesn't have the enzyme that breaks it down. And you wouldn't know it from this movie. I was convinced that there was this sad story about Richard E. Grant, right? That he actually was a big drinker, kind of like Robert Downey Jr. in Less Than Zero, right? That yes, in fact, his experiences as a big drunk are what prepared him for this role. Not the case. In fact, to get the role, they made him drink vodka and champagne, go on a 12-hour drinking binge, mixing those, to get him to, he at least had the muscle memory or the knowledge of what it feels like to have a headache, to be drunk, etc. Richard E. Grant, oddly enough, really healthy guy, during a 2005 interview, he said that his habits include running 4 miles a day, horseback riding, tennis, and swimming. Now, actors say that. Who knows if it's true, but he looks pretty fit. Like, I believe him. So his ability to play this legendary drunk, I mean, that is acting.
Yeah, but I mean, the characters are both desperate actors to get roles. So they would do anything to get it. The fact that he actually did that, that's a dedication. You got to do it. He's fantastic. But like, what film company? Like, that makes me question the studio that put this out. And it's like, okay, listen, we would love you to play a prostitute, Julia Roberts, but can you please, we're going to need you to do at least 4 or 5 tricks. We're going to put you on the corner. We're going to need you to have sex with at least 4 Johns so you can get into character. That wouldn't happen today.
You know this company, though, Handmade Films, right? They did Life of Brian. They did Lock, Stock, and 2 Smoking Barrels. This is a serious production company now, but these were the early days. These are the 80s, anything goes days for Handmade Films. And they did a lot of weird shit in those days. Fun factoid to add on to that, though, Jake, the poacher with the eels in his pants, actually drunk while filming. They said that he was so drunk that they had to film his lines sometimes half a line at a time and then put it together in editing because he was fucking wasted.
Oh, there's no doubt. That I could tell. You could tell. He's a genuine... I didn't think he was an actor. I thought he was actually one of the locals because he's got this disdain for these two guys. And they keep saying, we're not from London. Don't worry, we're not from London. But he looks at him. He's like, oh, I've been watching you, especially you, prancing around like a tit. He's like, you want a working on boy? That's not an actor. That is some like guy from the countryside of England who's going to beat his ass. That was a great performance.
Withnail and Marwood drive to the cottage the next day, but find the weather cold and wet, the cottage without provisions, and the locals unwelcoming. In particular, a poacher, Jake, whom Withnail offends in the pub. Marwood becomes anxious when he later sees Jake prowling around the cottage and suggests they leave for London the next day. Withnail, in turn, demands that they share a bed in the interest of safety, but Marwood refuses. Hearing the sounds of an intruder breaking into the cottage that night, Withnail joins Marwood in bed. The intruder turns out to be Monty, who has arrived with supplies.
Whenever you do like road trip movies or you do movies about a group of friends, it's easy to view the film in a favorable light if you can relate to the people. If these are guys, characters, girls that you would want to hang out with, you immediately see yourself with them. Withnail, Marwood, Monty, even Danny, this is like the core group of people. They're all eccentric. They're all fun types of people that I would love to spend time drinking or going to get rejuvenated in the countryside. I would want to do this. They're like the people I like, the ones who can bust each other's balls. You can make fun of each other, but no one is truly mean. You know, they're not running around scamming people to get drunk. They have money. They're paying their bills. You know, if someone in the bar insults your friend, you're going to try to protect them. You know, they're in this small little cocoon where they're just concentrating on drinking, whether it's lighter fluid or booze, and just watching the world around them go by, insulting them. And as the movie goes on, we'll get to the end. There is some growth in the film because you always tease me that I like to have movies with lessons. And at the end, people have gone on a journey. But you see these two friends. They are each other's world. If they were alone, each one of them, they might just go off and die. They might end up in their apartment overdosing. They keep each other alive. And it made me think of the friends you have who, as the fun times keep going, it's harder if you don't have a friend in the group who's motivated, whether somebody who gets the job or somebody who pushes you to be better. And these two guys, they're perfect for each other, but their little world starts to feel very small, and they're very much in need of each other.
You mentioned that these characters are eccentric but not mean, and it reminds me of recently, Sarah and I made a stop in Antwerp for one reason and one reason alone. So, you know, people go to Belgium, they go to Brussels because it's the capital, it's the big city. They go to Bruges because it's got all the picturesque bridges and the canals and stuff like that. They go to Ghent because it's a medieval city with all that charm. Not a lot of people go to Antwerp, right? Unless I guess they're looking for diamonds or something. But we had to stop in Antwerp for one reason, and that was Café Culminator. Now, for people who aren't in the know and aren't huge beer fans, Café Culminator is a very special place where you knock on the door. They may answer it, they may not. The guy walks very, very slowly, so you have to be very patient. And when he gets to the door, he's going to ask you what you're there for. And this isn't a shtick. This isn't some like cool club or like one of those like, you know, speakeasies where you got to know the password, right? This is a legitimate older Belgian man, and he wants to know why you're there. And if you say you're there to drink beer, he's not letting you in. You have to say, I'm here to taste Belgian beer. And then he'll say, okay. He'll let you in. There is a board. The board has like 4 of their draft beers, things that are on tap, and they're all lambics. Don't drink those. He's not going to tell you not to drink those. He will gladly sell you that. But the whole point is that there is a folder that is just making its way around the place that people hand from one to another. You have to actually go like talk to anybody who's got the folder and be like, hey, and nobody explains this to you. You got to figure it out for yourself. You find that folder, and that folder has a list of all the beers that he has gathered over the last 40, 50 years. They're in his cellar. They're right there. And you can pick one out and you can drink it. You can find a beer that was released your birth year from a monastery, a Trappist, monastery somewhere in Belgium. You can get that beer and you can drink it. He only accepts cash. He's not going to explain any of this to you. It smells kind of like cat pee in there. His wife is very friendly, but she doesn't talk to you. and his English is limited, right? My point in this whole story, though, is it was the most magical fucking experience. He's Monty, right? He is quoting Baudelaire and walking through the countryside. Completely inaccessible, weird person. My life is better because I encountered this guy. Just doing his thing, right? He's not mean. He just does not give a shit.
Okay, so dear listener out there who thinks Gene Lyons is full of shit, and Gene Lyons is just that Gene Lyons is that character I talked about before, pretentious, and this is not really who he is. Dear listener, you are wrong. I've been lucky to experience Gene Lyons in the wild. This is genuinely him. Because I would say, if I had a friend come and say, I like to go to Bruges, I go to a secret tasting of beer. And if I say I would like a beer, they say, you're not here. I'd say, shut the fuck up. That is not Gene Lyons. Gene Lyons is a human being who I've experienced him, who will take us to like the oldest diner in Alabama, or will take us to like, what was it? Like the giant, like the biggest milkshake or whatever the hell that place was you made us go as we were driving around the South. Gene is this person, and I admire it. He makes me want to be better. He makes me want to get out my inner Sandy. And if I was given the option, we get to this cottage, right? They're leaving London. They want to go to this cottage in the countryside. Again, I still don't pick up at 69 because whatever, this is the English countryside. Looks like it's modern day to me as well. They go out and it is cold. It is rainy. It is run down. There's no heat. There's no food. I would stay in this place in a second.
Yeah.
I don't know that I always would have, but after Gene, I would be there. I don't need some posh hotel. Give me this authentic cottage. It's wet. It's cold. Yes, we have to go out and problem solve, Gene. We got to find firewood. We got to talk to the neighbors to get food. We got to meet the locals. We got to go on adventures. That's when you have fun. When you overcome challenges, that's the stuff you remember. I remember us going through New Orleans and finding the tiny hole in the wall with the band that you never would have found, or that metal bar we went to where you have to like, you can't bring your cell phone out. That shit is Gene Lyons. And I want to be like that. It is so great. And these characters, when they go out there, this is the vacation I would want. And you even just talked about your vacation there, going to find your secret, like little hole in the wall, like tasting and your binder. I don't even know how you find that out. I don't want to know. I don't want to know the secrets of what makes you tick. But do you look down sometimes on people who do more like traditional? Like if I go on a cruise, are you like, oh, Big D, he's on the MSC cruise again? Do you do that, or do you kind of accept me for occasionally when I go on a traditional vacation?
Absolutely not. I think younger Gene Lyons might have. I'm at the age now, man, where I think your vacation is all about what you need when you need it. Like if you've been having a crazy year and everything's topsy-turvy, then going to find rare beers in Belgium and ducking in and out of tiny bars and being on your feet all the time and having to keep a tight schedule with trains. And I mean, Sarah and I stayed in 5 different cities and had to pack up all of our stuff from each hotel and move to the next one, going by train city to city over the course of like 9 days. It was hectic, right? Mm-hmm. If you've had a crazy ass year, no, man, go sit on a beach somewhere, get on a cruise. Like it's what you need when you need it. When I'm invited by my less adventurous friends and family to a posh place or to a very simple place, an all-inclusive resort or something, I've now learned embrace that as yet another adventure because that's cool as hell. Like it's relaxing. Like what's what it's supposed to do. I'm not very good at relaxing, but it is. But I love to go and experience things that other people like because it's just a different way to look at it. But for the most part, I really do love staying in those weird places. And I have an email that I want to read to you, Big D. This comes from the managing director of a hotel that we stayed at. We'd stayed at a place called Erasmus. Peter, who's the managing director. One night, Sarah and I get back to the hotel room and I'm going to take a bath. There's no shower. It's just a tub, kind of like in this movie. And on the towel, because it had rained that night, the towel was covered in these little bugs. They're just crawling all around the towels. And I look at them and I'm like, oh, they don't look like roaches and they don't look like bed bugs. I don't know what the fuck those things are. So I took a picture of them, ran a Google image search, and I figured out that they're wood lice, which sound worse than they are. They don't eat wood and they actually are not lice either. So the next day as we're leaving, I tell Mick, who's like the breakfast lady down there, I say, hey, Mick, we're checking out. Thank you so much, blah, blah. Just wanted you to know there's some wood lice up in the room. And not a problem. I don't need a refund or anything. I just wanted to let you know because I think another person might freak out if they go to take a towel and it's crawling in bugs. And I've got video and photos I can share with you. She says, oh, yeah, please email them to us so that we can take a look at them and see what those bugs are. So I email them and I get an email back from Peter. He says, Dear Mr. Lyons, those animals, all harmless. They come inside when window is open. They like wet places. The only thing we can do is clean them up in the morning. We tried poison, but they always come back in the summertime. We need a cold winter to freeze them dead. Many thanks to let us know. We will do our best to keep them outside. Kind regards, Peter. Like, that's great.
That was fantastic. I thought he was going to take your veiled threat. I have videos and photos. I'll email them to you. It's like the American's going to like destroy our online reviews. But that's sweet. That's amazing.
It's so good. And conversely, right, on one of the nights we splurged. In Bruges, highly recommend Canal View Terrien. It was the honeymoon cottage right on the canal. The French doors open right in. At midnight, Big D, swans. There's a family of swans that live on the canal. They come swimming by just silently in the night. It's absolutely beautiful. And that was my favorite place that we stayed. So not the most hole-in-the-wall place. Absolutely beautiful. I mean, it wasn't the Marriott by any means. Yeah, it's all about variety, right? Everything in moderation.
Agreed.
Well, the next day, Marwood realizes Monty's visit has ulterior motives when Monty makes aggressive sexual advances. But Withnail seems oblivious. Monty drives them into town and gives them money to buy Wellington boots, but they spend it in a pub and cause a disturbance at a small cafe. Monty is hurt, though he forgets the offense as the three drink and play poker. Marwood is terrified by the thought of Monty's further sexual overtures and wants to leave immediately, but Withnail insists on staying. So if I had to choose a favorite scene in Withnail and I, the cafe would be it. As soon as they go to town in Penrith and they go to the pub first, I start like bouncing up and down in my seat. I'm clapping my hands. So Marwood and Withnail, they display in this scene what a force they can be. You know, as you mentioned, Big D, when they team up, when they buddy up and they're not digging into each other and they play off of each other, they're incredible. They go into this tiny tea shop. It's full of old people. They sit down. They proclaim themselves multi-millionaires, and they demand the finest wines available to humanity. They want them here, and they want them now. They're helping themselves to tea room foods, which, by the way, like if you haven't done afternoon tea, it's not cheap. Okay? Like they are sitting down, they're eating all these sweets. They're clashing with the propriety of the owner and the patrons. This is such a great example of what Richard E. Grant and Paul McGann can do, because imagine this same scene with another actor who does this sort of thing. A Steve Martin, a Chevy Chase, right? Going in and just giving a middle finger to everybody in there and being a complete ass. It would drive me insane. I'd be like, why are you being so mean to these old people who are just trying to enjoy their tea?
Yeah, they're fun. They're not mean. I think that's the biggest thing. Like you talk about Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase always, when he goes into these small towns and he's going to be the fish out of water, he's always somehow has to come out on top. These guys are basically saying, just leave us alone. We're going to drink. We're getting really drunk. We need some of your tasty cakes to soak up the alcohol. Let us be. And then they're dropping we're millionaires. And of course, pulls up the uncle with the Rolls Royce or whatever he's driving. So they go out there victorious. And I'm starting to even now feel for Monty. Monty, he took him in because he goes, you can't walk around the countryside without your rubber boots. And he wants them to go get some razors and shaving cream. Now, later on, you learn it's because he's looking to get some action. So maybe he's hoping he'll clean up a bit. But, you know, he's a little upset. Does it last long? He's like, no, I'm preparing myself to forgive you guys. I think it's been punishment enough. He's sassy. He's sassy, and it's all leading towards a fun adventure where nobody's getting hurt.
I'm going to differ with you on the fact that they are kind of mean to the people at the cafe. They're like, balls! They're yelling at him. And this is the only scene, actually, you mentioned that they don't laugh at their own jokes. Richard E. Grant was trying to keep it together during this scene, and I think that's what also makes it kind of special, is he's involuntarily laughing take after take. And it's not because of anything that they were saying, but these old people, you never see it, I don't think, in the movie, but the old people in the background, they had little dogs with them. And the dogs kept snorting, and that was making him laugh. And they just were like, fuck it, leave it in. So a bit of trivia there for you, something we don't often do on Shat the Movies. But watch that scene and check him out. He's losing his shit.
Gene, we're breaking a lot of ground today. We don't normally read hotel reviews either.
No.
Or responses from hotel staff. Tonight, it's a big moment. It's a turning point in Shat the Movies.
Also, side note, Cafe Culminator, if you do plan on going there, people, get there soon because the owner has hurt his hip. He's having trouble going up and down the stairs, and they may not be around for very long. I'm serious.
Now we're getting medical updates on tourist attractions.
I asked his wife in like my broken Dutch. Basically, I said, which beers are closest to the stairs so he wouldn't go too far. And I picked those because I felt bad having him go deep into the cellar to get the beer. By the way, get the Black Betty. It's the best. Late in the night, Marwood is eventually cornered in the guest bedroom as Monty demands sex. He reveals that Withnail, during the visit in London, lied that Marwood was a closet homosexual. Marwood lies that Withnail is the closeted one and that the two of them are in a committed relationship, which Withnail wishes to keep secret from his family. He said it's the first night in 6 years that they have not slept together. Monty, a romantic, believes this explanation and leaves after apologizing for coming between them. In private, Marwood furiously confronts Withnail, and the next morning they find Monty has left for London. A telegram arrives from Marwood's agent with a possible offer of work, and Marwood insists they return to London. Big D, you mentioned that part of Monty's motivation, although he's a sweet guy, is that he wants to get that booty. Mm-hmm. It made me think about one of the many benefits of marriage. You and I, both married men now, you never have to have the thank you but no conversation. You got the ring, and people generally know that you're married. Or even if they don't, it's not a mean thing to say, I'm sorry, I'm married, right? As opposed to, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. Because occasionally in life, there are those people like Monty who put their pride aside and they're just going to proposition you for sex. As a heterosexual man, I feel even worse when it's a woman who's putting that pride aside and saying, yeah, I'm down. And when you have to say no. And I've never slept with somebody out of pity, but I, like Marwood, I'm very bad about being direct and just saying I'm not interested, which, let's be clear, like that's the most respectful thing you can do, right? I think everybody would just want to know, no thanks, I'm not interested, as opposed to dragging it out or playing along like you're kind of interested just to soften the blow. And Big D, I'll be honest, I have gotten in bed with men and women and just waited until they fell asleep and then snuck out of the bed. That's how bad I am about just saying no thanks.
No, but that's nice. You care about them, especially in 69, right? It's a difficult thing. I've always thought, because I've been propositioned, especially when I was younger,
sure,
by men, and I took it as a compliment. Mm-hmm. For a man to hit on me, you have to get over the normal social awkwardness of what if they don't like me? What if they don't? With the fact that I could just rampage him, that I could just savagely attack this person. So I take it as a compliment when someone is willing to hit on me. And I don't know. I was missing it up until this point. I thought just that he was the eccentric uncle. I didn't pick that he was being a little bit predatory. You said that he's coming after, that he wants this young, hot guy. So Withnail, for no reason, is actively pimping out Marwood. He does it like constantly. When they think the gunman is broken out into the house and he's downstairs and he's going room to room, Withnail says, oh, the gunman's broken in. He's in your room. You need to go to him. You go take care of him. He wants you. Offer yourself to him. I don't know. In the write-up you read, they describe Withnail as flamboyant alcoholic. I'm wondering, do you think there's some deflection there? That he is the one who's possibly closeted in his own insecurity? He's pushing. That's why he's driving Marwood to the uncle?
I don't know. I think it's more likely that Withnail just wants to avoid any negative repercussion. They call him out in this movie about it. And Monty says, like, essentially that his only ambition in life is just seeking pleasure, right? He wants to avoid anything that's uncomfortable. And that includes dealing with people breaking into the house, dealing with his gay uncle. All he has his eyes on is, I want the key to the cottage. I want wine. And the way to get that is to say, Marwood is gay. Go after him.
But Marwood is like, hey, listen, let's go to bed. Let's get up there. Let's get away from him. And he goes, I'm going to sleep. You sleep alone. And sets him out there. And I started to feel bad because the uncle, he is so nice. And you said you will sneak out at night because you don't want to hurt somebody's self-esteem. I think this is above sexuality or what you choose normally in your partners. He has been a kind, loving, like, uncle and friend to the group. He's treated them well. He's entertained them at his flat in the city. He's gotten them drunk. He's taken them here. He's let them take the cottage. He doesn't get upset. And I found myself wondering, like, why why would you not try to be nice? Okay. Marwood's got not much going on in his life. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He's not expressed really any dislike for the uncle or his sexual proclivity. So why not? Would it be so wrong, Gene, for him to just say, listen, here's this old guy. He's alone. He's pining for like his relationships of the past. I'm not saying go full penetration. So he comes on to him. Marwood fights him off. He then comes back again. He overcomes the fear. I think he should have at least let him give him oral sex or pleasure the uncle with his hand. Neither one of these would have compromised his morals. And it might have been fair emotional payment for everything they've done. He taught him how to like season the duck. Just make the old guy feel happy. If you weren't married, Gene, would you, an older, let's say a widow, would you, if she came on, you said, look at your lovely hair, would you give her the feeling at the end of the night that she was still desirable and this would be a night she'd remember for years?
I don't think I could, because it's the same with like Monty. I think that a person would be crushed if they found out that you did it out of pity. You know, maybe Monty's like Dario Naharis from Game of Thrones, right? Like it has to be desire. Like that's the part he seeks, right? He wants that passion. Yeah. He's a true romantic. But you bring up an interesting dilemma though, Big D, which is, let's say there is a guy you feel you're indebted to for his kindness and generosity, right? You're not particularly attracted to him though. And you got to choose between giving him a handy or letting him go down on you. And he's like, I'm up for either. Oh. Which one are you going with?
That's a tough one.
I can tell you hands down, I'm doing handy. I'm giving him the handy.
See, but that's an act that takes your attentive and your active participation. You're going to have to, Gene, I picture it. You're like grabbing the shaft and you're like, oh shit, do I go for the balls? Okay, I'll work the balls. I'll work the shaft. And then you're thinking about, man, should I go above and beyond? Okay, let me really work the technique. You would try to improve the experience. Whereas if he went down, you could just close your eyes. And you could climax and he would feel like, oh great, I had this guy, this was a great moment. But yeah, I think I would let him go down to me. I think I could close my eyes.
Jerking a dude off is just like any other manual task, right? Like milking a cow or, I don't know, shining shoes or something like that, right? Whereas getting a blowjob,
no,
somehow that's like a sexual act. Also, what if I can't get hard? Then it's really insulting.
No, but you instead, you wouldn't want to half-ass it, Gene. You like to go full bore. You couldn't just, you're going to make eye contact. You're going to like throw your hair back. You're going to try to make this an experience.
He's getting the 7 pleasures at the Casbah, for sure.
He is, but I think that's why you just you'd be fine, Gene. This isn't like, last week, Betty is going to kiss the sleeping slug. You would wake up fine. You would do just fine. But you earlier, you described his demands for sex. I don't think that's what the uncle is. I think he's more sympathetic. He is not predatory when it comes to this young man. He sees himself in him. He grew up repressed. He grew up hiding who he was. In Marwood, he sees a younger version of himself. He sees him making the mistakes he did. He says, you're going to miss out on the freedom and the joys that I missed out on. He wants him to come out. He's more of like a mentor than a predator. He tells the story about the young man when he was at school, his first experience. It is like a memory that he's trying to share to awaken in Marwood and get him to open up. And I can't blame him for going after him. His nephew has been telling him, oh yeah, he's closeted. Oh yeah, he wants to come out. He wants to be with a man. He's pumping this whole situation. He cooked him a fancy meal. Come on a superficial level, you got to really feel bad for this guy. He's been put in a situation. Now, think about how devastated he is because he overhears the conversation.
Yeah.
He must feel like unsexy, unwanted, unloved. He probably, in the future years, never goes over that barrier of nervousness to reach out at a chance of love again. These two, if there is any victim in this film, it might be Monty.
Well, I agree that Monty is a sweetheart, but let's think about this rationally, okay? If Marwood were a woman and Monty were straight, this would be horrifying. He corners him and says, "I mean to have you, even if it must be burglary."
Yeah,
that seems pretty aggressive to me.
Right, but again, this is everything he's been led up to believe. If someone had told you that story about this young girl, that she wanted you, that she was afraid to be intimate with someone, you would believe everything. So he's not a monster. If anyone, it is Withnail who has put him into this corner and painted this as some thirsty young closeted man, and he's a horny old guy who sees lustfully in himself when he was younger. Let's just thank God they got out of that country cottage with everybody's purity intact, or whatever his what do they call it?
Butthole?
Manhymen was still intact.
Well, as Marwood sleeps in the car, Withnail drunkenly speeds most of the way back until pulled over by the police, who arrest him. The pair return to the flat to find Danny and a friend named Presuming Ed squatting. Marwood calls his agent and discovers he'd wanted for the lead part in a play, but will need to move to Manchester to take it. The four share a huge joint, but the celebration ends when Marwood learns they have received an eviction notice for unpaid rent. Withnail is too high to care. Marwood packs a bag to leave for the railway station and turns down Withnail's offer for a goodbye drink. In Regent's Park, Marwood and Withnail part ways. Alone with a bottle of wine in hand, Withnail performs What a Piece of Work is Man from Hamlet to the wolves in a nearby zoo enclosure, then turns to walk home in the rain.
So, Jane, we finally gotten it. We've done probably about 8 or 9 British films. I've finally gotten my British car chase. I can get behind this one. It explains everything to me. I understand it. So you talk about Withnail he's drunk out of his mind. He is driving this beat to shit 1961 Jaguar Mark II. He's got no license. He is actively cutting people off on the highway. He ultimately cuts off the police. And it is a slow chase, but the police are driving this 1970 Austin Morris J4 van. Not the fastest vehicle. It is a slow speed chase. And I got it. It all clicked. The British, there is no honking. There's no screaming. There's no cursing. There's no pulling out the guns. It is a lot of pointing and scoffing. Like, "Oh, what are you doing? Pull over." He pulls over. They arrest him, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be the callback to that little, like the Whizzinator, the 1969 Whizzinator, the fake little bladder that you can get around the DUI, the pouch of unadulterated children's piss. And it fails gloriously. Withnail is drunk behind the curtain, and the police are like, what's he doing? He starts spraying the wall and the officers with urine. It was a perfect fitting end to this holiday out in the country. It was glorious. Thank you, England. I get your car chases.
The setup on this joke is so good, too, because early in the film, you see Danny bring it over. He's inventing new things. They take it with them in the original part of the road trip as they're going out to the cottage. He explains that they got to get their hands on a child so they can get unadulterated child's piss. Then later in the film, they get pulled over after he's been drinking. You're like, this is where it comes in. And then it's revealed that he has collected the child piss. He has gotten to the point where he correctly refused the breathalyzer, got to the piss test, and at the last second, he's not just like getting caught. As you said, Big D, he is spraying that shit everywhere. It's absolutely brilliant. And then they never address it again. Somehow they're home. Everything apparently worked out. It made me miss so much, Big D, drinking in the car. For those of you who've never experienced this pleasure, okay? In parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, you could just drink in the car as long as you're a passenger. And Big D and I, during my bachelor party, had basically a challenge of who could drink the most Crispy Boys. Crispy Boys being like domestic light beers, lagers, pilsners, etc. in the van. King B, being either out of his generosity or just to be a killjoy, decided, I'm not drinking. I'll be the driver of the van. And so we're just slamming. I mean, Big D would go into a gas station, come back with a 30-pack. We're going. We got coolers just full of beers. Road trips are the greatest. Road trips with drinking, even better.
100%.
And so finally we get back to the apartment and back to Danny and Presuming Ed. And in seeing Danny, the drug dealer, I felt so duped by Russell Brand because we were all very into Russell Brand. We'll be doing Forgetting Sarah Marshall pretty soon here. And at his peak, he was pretty entertaining. But his whole act is just a shitty version of Danny the drug dealer. I'm watching this guy and I'm like, fuck, he's weird. And he's a dealer who's like pushing like pills like the embalmer. But I feel like I need this guy in my life to take me to the next level of drug use, right? To teach me to smoke or swallow new drugs, but then firmly and gently tell me how to navigate them. And this is an art. This is a talent that not a lot of people have. He is so good at shepherding Withnail and Marwood through that giant joint. They call it the Camberwell carrot because he invented it in Camberwell and it looks like a carrot. He says, first off, like, this will tend to make you very high. And then you see Withnail, he's crawling on the ground. He's laughing. He can't stop. Marwood is concerned about that. And what does he say just calmly? Just high. He's just high. And then Marwood is asking for some pills to bring him down. He needs a downer because he feels like he's too high. And what does Danny say? He says, you have done something to your brain. You have made it high. If I lay 10 mils of diazepam on you, you will do something else to your brain. You will make it low. Why trust one drug and not the other? And if I were high off my ass, I'd be like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Danny.
Now I'm going to assume that Danny's got a dark side. That Danny probably hurts people. That Danny is not a good dude. But he's a treat. He's a very professional, firm hand. And he helps, because if you're having a bad trip, the worst thing is when people start to, like, I had a girl once we were with, and she started melting down.
No.
That just makes everybody smile. But he's just like, hey, calm down. We're gonna have a good trip. We're gonna be okay. He is a great character. But I did not expect, Gene, for him to be so crafty and inventive. When he starts discussing that he wants to get out of the drug business, I was not expecting him to say he wanted to start developing toys and that he wanted to go in and start to, because they had the doll that would pee themselves and he's going to invent a doll that poops itself. He was fantastic. And I like this. When you get characters that break from traditional molds, I don't remember any other drug dealer, Gene, who wants to create a toy that defecates itself. So Danny, he's memorable. He's up there in my head now for drug dealers in the future.
Beyond that, I'm using his advice the next time I get high, which is the balloon metaphor. That was genius. It's like you're holding onto a balloon, you're getting high.
Yes.
And you're getting too high. Should you let go and fall down or just hang on? Keep getting higher. I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Danny is like the drug Yoda.
Yeah.
Danny, like any time that you would do drugs, you want Danny on your shoulder. His words of wisdom. And also there's no fluff.
No.
He doesn't use any extra words. It's very concise. It seems a bit harsh. But in the end, I would trust whatever Danny said.
Big D, I'm going to be honest. I'm so glad that you enjoyed this film. I was worried that you would not care for this movie. And I kept thinking, what can I do during this podcast to convince you that it was a funny movie? All I kept coming up with was quotes, right? Don't threaten me with a dead fish. My favorite, here, hair, here, the note from The Poacher. It wants to get down the hill and have sex with those cows. Like, it is a funny movie to be quoted, but quoting a movie has never, I don't think in the history of man, convinced anyone that a movie is funny or special. So I had to think harder. And I was like, what makes this movie special? What sets it apart from other comedies? And then it hit me. It's special because it's so melancholy. Like, Airplane might have 1,000 jokes an hour. The Naked Gun might have that machine gun of gags, as you've said. But Withnail and I, it is so gloomy. It is so grimy. It's so melancholy. There is a sadness throughout this whole film, and it really works its way into your heart. And then you kind of find those little moments of joy in the script, and you find yourself smiling despite the sadness.
See, but it's hard because I'm trying to separate the two. I think the England we see, yes, it looks and feels very gloomy, very grimy. It's overcast. The city's filthy. Again, I thought this was like modern England. Forgive me. I just thought the cars would beat the shit. But the film finds this comedy in this bleakness. And it's not self-loathing. It's not condescending. It's not mean-spirited. These guys, this is a story. Like you said, you were surprised earlier that people who you recommend this movie to like it. It's a very simple story that's universal. It's about people trying to find their way, people trying to find their way in life, wherever they live. I don't think it is as melancholy as you let on. It's just some guys in kind of a situation. They got to grow. And I wonder what happens in the future, but that's unimportant. And just as abrupt as the movie starts, it's title card. Here we are at the end. There is no what's next. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens to Withnail. It doesn't matter what happens to I, whether or not he goes off and becomes a successful actor. Our story was this small window. That's it. Closed. Goodbye. And I didn't find it as depressing. I found it more retrospective on what a friendship could do. So in the end, I liked it, surprisingly.
And you mentioned that these guys need each other. And it's interesting because Marwood does go off to Manchester to be in the play and get the lead role, which, by the way, the play that he's going to be in doesn't have a lead role, which makes it kind of funny. But on paper, Withnail goes home and kills himself.
No.
You would think that would indicate that he needed Marwood more than Marwood needs him. But honestly, I would say that experiencing someone like Withnail, being with someone like him, having those memories, I don't think anything Marwood would do, no matter how successful he becomes in life, I don't think he's ever going to recapture those days. And there's sort of a beauty to that as well. I think it's just an incredibly gorgeous film that has a lot of heart to it that you realize at the end.
God, I wish I didn't know that. Why'd you tell me that?
Well, they didn't do it in the movie.
But I still feel bad because this is the...
Well, no, it was like a draft, and then they were like, oh, no, let's not do that.
Okay, I'm glad they didn't do that.
But yeah, he goes home, pours himself a glass, and then rifle to the head.
Oh, well, he had the rifle. We've seen him shooting fish, so yeah.
Well, sadly, now is the time in the podcast when we must give our Shat score for Withnail and I. The Shat score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie would take to get out for respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It is the bliss found in a 2 quid dose of the embalmer. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster of a film. It's when your heart is beating like a fucked clock and you feel like a pig shat in your head. Big D, we'll start with you. What is your score for Withnail and I?
So we've had a string lately of British films. And we've commented before that like A Fish Called Wanda. That was hurt by a very odd title. It wasn't clear what it was about. I think this film is the same way. If this film had a different name, I think more people would be apt to see it. Withnail and I, people have no idea what it's about. What's Withnail? Is it Withnail and I? People don't know. People watch it. It's a short film. It's no 3-hour Betty Blue, but it is well worth it. I think, surprisingly, I think it's 1.25 wipes. It is low budget, and its success is based upon the characters being likable and the dialogue and the script and the writing of Bruce Robinson. It was fantastic, and he wrote later on for The Killing Fields, was nominated for an Oscar, and also he won the BAFTA for Killing Fields. Very talented. Dialogue is smart, fast, funny. And I'm still a bit shook here that he killed himself because I'm still feeling now that there was a dark edge to this movie that I missed. But it's fun to watch, people. It's probably my favorite British film that we've done. So hopefully I didn't let you down, Gene. And that's my honest assessment of this film. There's no rose-tinted glasses here to try to get you to not think I am a troglodyte or a caveman everyman on the podcast, that I can be a little cultured myself. But yeah, 1.25 wipes.
Honestly, every time I watch this movie, I discover something new. And I think this time with it, the discovery was that this movie is more universally enjoyable than I thought it was. I thought that this was a movie just for certain types of people or just for people who thought like me. But I think that I'm discovering that it's a much bigger film than that. And yeah, the initial release was small, but it's gotten a cult following. And I think the real measure of success here is you can find this movie streaming on Max. You can find this movie streaming on Amazon Prime. Like, it's not a hard to find movie. We've certainly watched movies that are way harder to find than this. So I think it's got a following. And I recently learned that there's a drinking game that goes along with it where people they drink exactly what they're drinking on screen with every drink. So when they drink a wine, you drink a wine. When they drink a whiskey, you drink a whiskey. When they do a quadruple whiskey, you got to do it too. And basically you're trying to make it through the whole movie, which I think is fantastic. I don't know if you have to do a joint or drink lighter fluid. I think you skip on those. But but again, the point being though is that the discovery this time was that this is actually a pretty big movie now, even though it came from humble beginnings. And I hope that those people listening who haven't watched it yet, give it a shot. It's very easy to find and it's well worth the time. So it's not too English for some, as I thought it would be. And I'm going to go 1 wipe on this one. And with 1 wipe from me and 1 1/4 wipes from Big D, that gives us an average wipe score of 1.125 wipes for Withnail and I.
So, Gene, that now places this, surprisingly, it's in the 93 spot. It is slightly better than Raising Arizona, Coming to America, When Harry Met Sally, and Better Off Dead. Slightly worse than Dazed and Confused, Blood In, Blood Out, and White Men Can't Jump.
I feel like this movie is right on par with Raising Arizona. It's slightly funnier. So I think that placement's accurate.
I think this is way better than Raising Arizona. If I can recommend a film, it would be this one. Short, funny. Go out there and tell us what you think.
Her womb was a barren place where my seed could find no purchase. What do we have coming up next week?
God, geez, I tried to come up with that tinsel quote. Gene, next week in this visual and conceptually impressive film, the 2-bit Berlin criminal Manny delivers some smuggled loot for his boss. He accidentally leaves the 100,000 mark payment on the subway car. Given 20 minutes to come up with the money, he calls his girlfriend Lola, who sprints through the streets of the city to try and beg the money out of her bank manager father and get to Manny before he does something desperate. Commissioned by Christian S. Came out in 99. And Gene, we're on a string of films here that most people are going to be like, is this an art house podcast? What happened to our big blockbuster films of the 80s and 90s? Yeah, so the summer of art house Shat continues.
Yeah, Euro Trip 2024. Big D, have you seen this one?
I have not yet.
So really cool. Were you a fan of 24, the TV series?
Jack Bauer, the astronaut agent. He could do everything, solve every problem.
Let's say season 1 of 24.
Okay. So yeah, save the president, fly a helicopter, maybe an experimental space shuttle. He could fly it, get a nuke into the desert. Yes.
Don't forget chasing the dragon.
Yes. Why? What does this have to do with 24?
It happens in real time, just like 24.
Ah, okay.
So like the call is placed and the 20 minutes is an actual 20 minutes.
Ah.
It's pretty cool.
Okay.
It's got a great soundtrack too. I'm excited.
I'm excited too.
Well, thank you, Christian, for commissioning our upcoming film. Thank you, Mike, for commissioning Withnail and I. I love you for it. Thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat The Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media, share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat The Movies. Email us, host@shatpod.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all the information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever we're fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.